Larry Krueger here from the Pig in a Pickle Krug Show with a little 49er video. Jordan Schultz had the news of the day. Brandon Aiyuk, torn ACL, done for the year. We'll talk about it next. First, we're brought to you by Pig in a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. Check them out. They're in Emeryville. They're in Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week from 11 a.m. till 8 p.m. or until they run out. And this video is sponsored by Better, the official daily fantasy sponsor of the Krug Show. Use Better to make daily fantasy lineups and win real money. That's right. We've done it. Download the app below. Make sure you use the promo code NINERS to get your first deposit matched up to $200. Thanks for Better being a proud sponsor of the Krug Show. All right, let's talk a little bit about Brandon Aiyuk. Jordan Schultz had it. Aiyuk, torn ACL, done for the year. And it just kind of feels like this isn't the Niners' year. You know, it really does. First you had the Aiyuk holdout. Then you had the Trent Williams holdout. Then you had CMC with his dual Achilles issue, and now you've got Debo sick and misses the Chiefs game. Now you got Aiyuk done for the year. There's no promise of CMC for sure coming back. The Niners have problems all over the roster. The special teams is a circus. The D-line can't stop the run. They miss Dre Greenlaw in the worst way, and Devondre Campbell is getting roasted. At least the Niners put Winters on the field more this week, but then he missed a tackle that resulted in Patrick Mahomes getting an extra 25 yards on the sidelines late in that game yesterday. So there is no perfect answer. All right, a lot of people are speculating. Should the Niners trade for a wide receiver? I've got no problem with the 49ers making a trade for a wide receiver, but they have a lot of other needs. They need a defensive back. They need a linebacker. They need an edge rusher. They need an offensive lineman. They could use a dynamic tight end. They could use another running back. And they can't fill every one of these needs. They just can't. So what are you going to do? You got to pick and choose. All right, here would be my game plan. As far as the running back, there are running backs on the street. I mean, you could make a small trade, or you could sign guys. Leonard Fournette's a free agent. Matt Breida's a free agent. There are backs out there that you could probably get either the trade route or possibly plucking somebody off a practice squad. I mean, the Chiefs, for example, just signed Kareem Hunt, but they have Amani Bailey, who's a 5'7", 210-pound running back from TCU, who's pretty dynamic. They've got him on their practice squad. So, I mean, you could pluck him from their practice squad and put him on your active roster if you had that conviction. But it doesn't sound like they do. What about veteran wide receivers? So I think I'd go the running back route, see if I could get somebody off the street or off free agency. As far as wide receivers, I've heard the names: Cooper Kupp, DeAndre Hopkins, T. Higgins, Deontavion Wicks, Tutu Atwell, Darius Slayton, Cortland Sutton, Deontay Johnson, George Pickens. People have thrown out that name. There's all kinds of names out there being bandied about. To me, it doesn't really make sense to trade for another older player and make your team that much older, especially if you're giving away draft capital. If you're going to give away draft capital, and you are, most likely if you're going to make a trade this time of year, you got to get somebody that you're going to have. You can't trade draft capital and then have some receiver that's a free agent at the end of the year or something like that. You got to have somebody that you can contractually have on your roster for a couple of years, especially if you're going to trade a day one or day two pick. Some of the interesting, there's Cortland Sutton's names out there. The two interesting names to me would be Tutu Atwell and Garrett Wilson. Why? Well, let's talk about Atwell first of all. He's a go pattern guy. He's a 4.2 burner. People are like, oh, well, he ran slower than Cowing. Well, either way, I mean, whatever. Cowing ran, a little tick faster for the stopwatch on some test, but you know what? Anybody who knows Tutu Atwell knows he's been a sub 4.3 burner for years. He's a blur, and he's quite a bit faster than Jacob Cowing. But you could also get him for nothing. I think you could pretty much get him for nothing. Tutu's is a free agent at the end of the year. I don't think you'd have to give up a whole lot to get him. Garrett Wilson's an interesting name. They just traded for Devontae Adams. There's a lot of talk that they don't want to trade, Garrett Wilson. Why would they? They would rather trade Mike Williams, who can't run anymore, so nobody really wants him. But I'll say this about Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson is a good route runner, and Garrett Wilson's a dynamic player. And he's a young player. And to me, the 49ers, they got to figure this out. Ricky Pearsall got no separation. Cowing is very young and underpowered. JJ doesn't run well. Debo, doesn't beat man coverage. And now you've got Aiyuk, your best man coverage beater, who's now out for the year with an ACL, and who knows what his career will bring going forward. So do the Niners need a receiver? Yeah, they need a receiver, but they could use a young, dynamic receiver. They don't need an older receiver. They need a young, dynamic receiver. Garrett Wilson represents that. And so I'd be willing to move a day 2 pick, or maybe a combination of day 2 picks, maybe a 2 and a 3. I'd be willing to make that kind of a move for Garrett Wilson. Why? Because I think Wilson's the kind of difference maker that could make the Niners quite a bit better. Right now, they're not doing a lot of play action. Right now, they got Purdy in the gun 80% of the time, and it's a downfield passing attack. That's what it is. That's what they have. So, if you're going to have that kind of a passing attack, you better get some separation. And if you looked at one thing yesterday in the game, is that the Niners didn't stand up to the Chief defensive line and couldn't protect Purdy for the most part. Purdy would have had far more sacks if he had run. Also, Purdy had 3 picks. He easily could have had 5 picks. He had a couple other balls that were tipped up into the air that easily could have came down in Chiefs' arms, so the arms of Chief defenders. So you know what? It was a rough day at the office for Brock Purdy, but to me, what's happening is that Purdy is shouldering the load for receivers that aren't getting separation, and he's operating behind a line that's fallible, that's causing him to have a lot of pressure. So, a lot of pressure on the quarterback usually is a good thing for defenses. So lack of separation from a wide receiver or a tight end from man coverage makes it all the more difficult to make plays. So, it all comes down on Brock Purdy. I understand that. But yeah, the report on Ian Rappaport's report is that Aiyuk has a torn ACL and MCL. There may be other damage. But his season is done. It's going to be a long road back for 2025. And he doesn't have just a little, he's got an ACL. No, he's got a full-blown ACL, MCL, and there may be more damage than that. So they need a younger receiver who's dynamic, who can separate versus man coverage. And Garrett Wilson can do that. So that's the guy I'd try to get. I realize it's going to cost you a couple picks. But, the 49ers have blown 7 first-round draft choices in this regime. 7 blown number ones. To me, if there's an argument at all to trade away some of your picks and get veteran players instead, it's for the 49ers who don't hit in the first round. So imagine if they had hit on 4 of those or 3 of those instead of none. Imagine if the Niners had 3 or 4 first-round draft choices on their roster, contributing right now, 3 more than they have currently. They'd be a different team. So the fact of the matter is, when you go 0 for 7 in the first round, and the only first-round picks that you have to speak of in this era are Ricky Pearsall, who's largely an unknown, and Nick Bosa, who was the second pick in the draft. You've blown it. You've blown it, and that's why you're at where you're at. So they're going to have to draft a whole lot better in the future than they have in the past, that's for sure. And to me, since I don't have a lot of confidence in them picking the right players, if you could get a Garrett Wilson for a couple of day 2 picks, I'd do it. I absolutely would do it. I think he's the kind of receiver they need. I think he's a guy who can separate from man coverage. I think he's a guy that could emerge and evolve into the best receiver on the team. The reality is, whether it's right now or a year from now or a couple years from now, the Niners are going to have to figure out their exit strategy from Kittle, from Aiyuk, from Debo, from Juice, from CMC. They're going to have to, football's, if you're going to stick around and you're going to be in a regime for more than 5 to 7 years, and right now that's where Lynch and Shanahan are at here in year 8, you're going to have to at one point say goodbye to some players. The Niners have been doubling down on their core. Our core is good enough. Well, you think we're the best team in football. You're not. Stop thinking that. If you think that, you're doing yourself a disservice. You're not the best team in pro football. How can you call yourself the best team in pro football when the Chiefs are beating you like a drum, and last time you played the Ravens, they beat you, and you're losing at home to the Arizona Cardinals. You're losing games to the Los Angeles Rams. You're not the same team that you were. It's just simple as that. So, first of all, they need a bunch of things, and I don't know that a receiver is going to save their bacon. But with the Aiyuk going out, if you got to go receiver, to me, either give me the deep burner who creates the space in Atwell, who I think the price will be low, or I'll pay a high price for Garrett Wilson. But I want a big-time, young, number one weapon that I can then go forward with. And then at the end of the year, if you want to say goodbye to Debo, you probably can. If you want to say, if you want to kiss off Aiyuk in a couple of years, you probably can. But you got to have some other receiver of note. Garrett Wilson would be the guy that I would offer multiple picks for if I were the 49ers. All right, that's going to do it for the video. Thanks to Pig and a Pickle for being the title sponsor of The Krug Show. This video is sponsored by Better, the official daily fantasy sponsor of The Krug Show. Use Better to make daily fantasy lineups and win real money. Download the app below. Make sure you use the promo code Niners to get your first deposit matched up to $200. And thanks to all of you guys for supporting The Krug Show on YouTube.